Under the deep purple sky of a late summer night in Edinburg, Texas, the heat was still rising off the pavement as Laura Martinez finished her shift at the H-E-B supermarket. The yellow sodium lights spilled over the back parking lot, where patches of darkness seemed to swallow every movement between the rows of metal containers. At 9 p.m., a coworker standing in the break room saw Laura clutching her small bag as she stepped past the edge of the light, heading toward the section of the lot known as the dead zone, because the cameras were always glitching. In her hand was an old keychain with a faded red chili pepper charm, something she'd carried on every night shift since high school. The coworker watched Laura's silhouette drift into the shadows near the cooling units. That was the last image of her anyone in this town would ever have. What happened in the next 7 minutes would leave Edinburg with a scar that wouldn't fade for nearly 3 decades. Before we dive deeper into the story, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss the latest cases. That late summer evening in Edinburg stretched out like a hot, damp blanket over the entire Rio Grande Valley, making the air both stifling and heavy with the lingering smell of sun-baked earth. The charcoal purple sky darkened faster than expected, as if the sunlight had been sucked out of the town, leaving low clouds lying motionless on the horizon. Along Klausner Boulevard, the weak yellow streetlights formed broken streaks of light, faintly illuminating shuttered storefronts and the black glass of small office windows. The whole town sank into the characteristic hush of South Texas summer nights. No loud traffic, no laughter, just the monotonous hum of air conditioning units running at full blast. Behind the H-E-B where employees ended their shifts, the parking lot was wide but deserted at night. Under the dim glow of a single high-pressure sodium lamp, the gravel-strewn ground reflected a pale yellow, creating long alternating strips of darkness that looked carved out of the night. The barbed wire fence running along the east side of the lot rattled faintly in the breeze, carrying the scent of dry grass and the day's trapped heat. The steady drone of the cooling units behind the warehouse mixed occasionally with the heavy metallic clang of someone closing a distant container door, making the lot feel even emptier and more unsettling. Near the end of the night shift, 20-year-old Laura Martinez stepped out the supermarket's back door. She was hugging her canvas bag that held her personal items, a few receipts, and the small notebook she always carried at work. Her long hair was tied back neatly, her uniform shirt slightly damp with sweat from a busy shift, but her face still wore its familiar calm expression. When the back door clicked shut behind her, the harsh white-blue light from inside the store vanished, leaving only the yellow parking lot lamp to cast part of her shadow on the ground. Laura took a few steps outside, head slightly down, one hand holding the bag, the other adjusting her strap. The darkness outside hit suddenly, making her squint a little, but she kept walking steadily toward the parked cars. From a distance, an accidental witness paused to watch and only saw Laura's figure moving past a row of old pickup trucks. She took her usual path, turning toward the edge of the lot where the darkness was noticeably thicker than near the door. Once outside the reach of the yellow light, nothing illuminated her clearly anymore, just a small silhouette blending into the large dark gaps between the vehicles. Then the silhouette disappeared completely. No one ever saw Laura again after that moment. When she didn't come home on time, her mother started to worry. Calls from the landline rang and went silent. The family drove the routes Laura normally took, past the park near their house, into neighborhoods where she had friends. They stopped at porch after porch, knocking and asking if anyone had seen Laura or noticed her with someone. All they got were head shakes, short answers, and a silence that grew more unnerving by the minute. The night dragged heavier than any before it. The phone never rang back. No one saw Laura stop at any store or friend's house. There wasn't a single clue she was still somewhere in town. When the night sky turned thick inky blue, and every hope that she was just running late evaporated, the family had to do what no one wanted: call the police and report that Laura Martinez had vanished without a single trace. That was the starting point of a mystery Edinburg would carry for decades. The next morning, as the sun barely cleared the valley rim, the back H-E-B parking lot still looked exhausted from the night before. Scattered trash, faint tire tracks, puddles reflecting the pale sky. 2 Edinburg Police Department patrol cars, quietly pulled into the delivery area, lights still flashing weakly, though the sirens were off. The first officer outstrung yellow police line, "Do not cross" tape around the rear door area, marking the spot believed to be the last place Laura Martinez appeared before she disappeared. Gone was the family's panic and frantic door knocking. Now there was only a cold crime scene and tiny details that could make or break a case. The morning shift manager led the officers to the exact metal back door Laura always used. The gray door was closed, the walkway to the lot dusted lightly. When a crime scene technician gently used a measuring rod from the door to the lot edge, everyone could see one thing clearly. The moment Laura crossed the threshold, she walked straight into a half-lit zone where the streetlight didn't fully reach, and the store light stopped right at the yellow paint line by the door. From that spot looking out, most of the back lot was swallowed by shadows from tall walls and parked vehicles. That was the true dead zone of light, where anything could happen unnoticed. The lead investigator, a middle-aged detective who'd handled plenty of missing persons cases in the area, stood motionless at the doorway for a moment, eyes slowly scanning the lot. He ordered some warehouse lights turned off so the outdoor lighting matched nighttime conditions, then had the manager explain the lighting system. Comparing the description to the lighting diagram, he quickly realized the area where the witness last saw Laura received no direct light from any lamp. It only got reflected glow, enough for a blurry silhouette, but not enough for the old camera above the door to capture detail. If someone wanted to approach an employee, leaving work without their face being clearly seen, they couldn't pick a safer spot. When technicians arrived to check the surveillance system, the first anomaly appeared almost immediately. The camera facing the back lot no longer pointed straight at the center as originally designed. It was angled sharply to one side, covering only a section of warehouse wall and a sliver of walkway. The new angle left almost the entire area where Laura was believed to have walked completely uncovered. The manager insisted there was no reason to adjust the camera, and no shift employee was allowed to touch it. An officer climbed a ladder to examine the mount. No breakage, no storm damage, just very faint fingerprints, and an unusually clean dust-free ring around the base, as if someone had handled it recently. Down on the gravel-mixed ground, techs began their meticulous work. They moved slowly, eyes down, using flags to mark disturbed spots. From the back door to the middle of the lot, the thick gravel layer suddenly looked more chaotic than normal. Some areas were compressed deeper, forming long indentations, several hand-widths long, mixed with patches that looked like a foot skid or something dragged. Footprints appeared in clusters, but were indistinct, soles overlapping, directions crisscrossing, all blending into the rough surface. Employee shoes, customer shoes, delivery drivers, every step was recorded, but none sharp enough to isolate a distinct track. Instead, it was visual noise on the ground, evidence of unseen chaos from the night before. Near the lot edge, where the weakest light touched the barbed wire fence, an officer bent down and picked up something so small it could easily have been missed. A dark plastic button with part of its paint chipped off. A few steps away, a dusty scrap of paper was lifted with tweezers into a small evidence bag marked evidence. Along the path, a few more tiny items, a pen cap, a bit of rubber band, a coin, were collected, but no one dared say yet whether they belonged to Laura. At this stage, anything out of place could become a puzzle piece later, and the only thing they could do was bag everything before time and weather erased it. When an officer noticed prints that seemed larger than most female employees' shoes, he took rough measurements and photographed the compressed gravel patches. But because the surface was uneven with no mud or water, sole patterns didn't imprint clearly. They were just vague depressions, suggesting more than one person had moved through quickly, possibly at the same time, possibly struggling. No one jumped to conclusions, but everyone understood. If answers existed, they wouldn't be visible to the naked eye. They'd be in the photos and lab samples. While the back lot stayed sealed, inside the store the lead detective sat with the shift manager demanding printouts of every employee and every transaction from the day Laura disappeared. Names, clockout times, delivery receipts, all underlined in red. The question, who was the last person to see Laura, was asked over and over, but every answer circled back to the same vague point. People remembered her walking out the back door, remembered her figure disappearing between the cars, but no one clearly saw her with anyone, or getting into any vehicle. The scene didn't give them a clear path. It only said something happened in the darkness between the store lights and the lot edge, and whoever did it had prepared well enough to leave nothing easily readable. It was from these small irregularities, the misaligned camera, the lighting dead zone, scattered debris, overlapping footprints, that the official investigation truly began, with the clear feeling this was no longer a simple wandered-off case. That afternoon, with the sun high and the back of the store still blocked off, the Edinburg PD digital imaging team was called in to pull every second of surveillance footage. Old tapes, memory cards and two bulky recorders worn from years of use were removed and sealed. No one expected much from 1991 image quality, but in disappearances like this, any frame, no matter how grainy, shaky or noisy, could break the deadlock. In a small room behind the store once used as the night shift break area, officers set up a folding table and connected cables to HEB's ancient playback machine from the previous decade. The CRT monitor flickered on, the familiar analog hiss adding tension. They started reviewing frame by frame, rewinding and replaying Laura walking out the back door. Exactly as the witness described, her figure appeared in a shadowed corner, took a few more steps, then moved out of camera range. But what silenced the room wasn't how quickly Laura vanished from view. It was that the camera recorded absolutely no movement afterward. No one following, no vehicle approaching, no unusual shadow or object passing the path she took. The frames after Laura disappeared were almost frozen, just dancing noise grains, and the faint yellow glow of distant parking lot lights. The lead detective leaned on the table, staring at the tape and exhaling softly. "Impossible," he muttered. "She didn't just evaporate, she got into a vehicle, or was pulled somewhere. Why is there nothing?" No one had an answer, but everyone started picturing the same thing. Someone had planned how to stay out of that camera's view. Someone knew the exact limits of its angle. Or worse, someone had been standing in the blind spot all along. A younger officer was sent to pull the second camera, the one at the east corner meant to watch deliveries. When that tape played, all they saw was a blinding white flare, as if a powerful light had been aimed straight at the lens. A long white streak rendered the entire frame useless. Slowing it down revealed the flare wasn't sunlight or streetlight. It was an unnatural burst that appeared roughly 1 minute after Laura walked out, then the image returned to normal. No one could explain it. No vehicle headlights could create that kind of close-range glare, unless the vehicle stopped in a spot mostly hidden from that camera. But if it stopped there, why no vehicle shadow before or after the flare? A more experienced tech leaned against the wall, arms folded, thinking. "If the light came from a very narrow angle," he said, "and if it was deliberate, someone could have used a handheld flashlight to blind the camera. No vehicle needed." The detective spun around. "You're saying someone stood just outside the frame, knew exactly what the camera could see, and flashed it to erase movement?" "Totally possible," the tech replied. "And if they turned the outdoor camera earlier, they could intentionally blind this one too." At that exact moment, another officer ran in from the street camera review, carrying a different tape from a city pole, a short distance from HEB. "Got something," he said, "but quality's bad." When the tape loaded, grainy Edinburgh street footage appeared, sparse traffic, neon glow from a car wash spilling onto the sidewalk, a few scattered pedestrians. At the 14-minute mark, a light-colored vehicle blurred across the very edge of frame, almost lost due to speed and low light. It was on screen for less than a second, no plate, no make visible, just a long, slightly tall, pale blurry shape that looked like an older van or SUV. The pale blur headed north, the same direction the witness said Laura walked after her shift. No one dared claim it was connected, but no one ruled it out either, because in nearly an hour of city street footage, it was the only vehicle that passed the area in the matching time window. The detective immediately ordered the segment enlarged. The result was a white smear, impossible to analyze. Still, the tech marked the exact timestamp and position to add to the timeline. That's when the chilling pattern became clear. The gap between Laura exiting the back door and the light-colored vehicle passing the street camera was longer than expected, not seconds, but minutes. And in those minutes there was zero visual record of Laura's movement. She vanished from the first camera, and never appeared on any other. A timing gap, the tech said. A dead zone in time that no camera caught. Between frames, Laura disappeared. The detective stood up straight, a chill running down his spine. This was no longer a young woman running away, no longer coming home late, no longer an accident. Someone had exploited the exact weaknesses in HEB's camera system, and may have studied them beforehand. Laura Martinez's disappearance, from that moment on, was no longer just a missing person report. It had become a suspected premeditated abduction by someone calm enough and knowledgeable enough to evade every electronic eye in town. And to find that person, police had to start with that terrifying void. Laura was gone in real time, but she never existed on any footage. While technicians kept analyzing the noisy tapes, other investigators were tasked with interviewing everyone present at HEB around Laura's clock-out time. Edinburg was only a medium-sized town back then, and like every small South Texas community, news of a missing girl spread faster than any radio bulletin. Within hours of police arriving, people showed up at the store wanting to share anything they thought might matter. But real investigation always starts closest to the victim. People who could observe Laura's behavior and mood right before she vanished. The first interview was with coworker Marisol Lopez, who worked the same evening shift. She sat in the employee break room, hands clasped, face tense. When asked about clock-out time, Marisol answered instantly. She seemed in a hurry, not late for something hurry, but like she wanted to get out of here as fast as possible. That got the detective's attention. Did she say why? Marisol shook her head. Nothing. Just kept checking her watch while changing. When I asked if everything was okay, she smiled and said, "I'm fine." But my gut told me something was off. In another setting, gut feeling might be dismissed. In missing persons cases, unusual behavior beforehand carries its own weight. What made the detective think even harder was Marisol's confirmation that Laura didn't wait for anyone to walk out with her, contrary to her normal habit. No, she went alone. I was going to walk out the same door, but she left a few minutes ahead. When cross-checked with the camera, it matched. Laura appeared alone, no conversation right before exiting. The second statement came from a regular customer who bought a few items just before closing. He was brought to the store security office to recount what he saw. He spoke slowly, trying to recall every detail. "I saw a man standing near the delivery area and back. Not a store employee, no uniform. I'm not sure what he was doing, but I remember the silhouette, pretty tall, arms crossed, like he was waiting for someone." The detective pressed, "Did you see Laura talk to him?" The customer shook his head. "I just saw her walk past that area. But the guy was watching her." Unease grew, but investigators couldn't build a case on a vague shadow. Still, when combined with the turned camera and the dark zone behind the store, pieces started connecting. Tall, motionless, watching, that wasn't the posture of someone just passing through. Yet the customer couldn't remember a face. No shirt, no hair. Only the stance. The third person brought in was a delivery driver, who had been in the receiving area that evening. At first he said he didn't notice anything unusual, but when pressed, he recalled one detail he hadn't thought important. There was a sound like metal hitting something. "I didn't see it. I was inside the cab, but it wasn't a normal crate sound, more like something sliding hard then stopping. Was anyone there? Didn't see anyone, but I glanced in the side mirror and caught a shadow moving. Could have been a warehouse worker. Not sure." When the three statements were laid side by side, three different angles emerged. Three puzzle pieces that didn't quite fit. Asterisk coworker, Laura seemed rushed. Asterisk customer, mysterious tall man near delivery area. Asterisk driver, metal impact sound at the critical moment. Three angles, none clear enough to decide anything. But the common thread, no one saw a clear face, no one could confirm what they heard or saw was related. And everything happened in the same window. Laura walked into the dark parking lot. The detective sat with the team and spread the three statements on the table. We have a girl in a hurry, a mystery man, and a strange noise, but we're missing the most important thing: the exact sequence. He pointed at the clock, then at the marker board timeline. Asterisk Laura walks out the back door. Asterisk camera loses her in the darkness. Asterisk a tall man standing near delivery area. Asterisk a metallic impact sound. Asterisk a light-colored vehicle briefly appears on street camera. The problem, he said, is we don't know if those two things happened before or after Laura disappeared. We don't know if the impact sound was related to her or just delivery activity. We don't know how long that man had been standing there or if he approached Laura. But the three statements not overlapping proves one thing. That night, Laura wasn't the only one in the parking lot. The word silenced the room. If multiple people were in the dark area behind the store and no one remembered clear details, it meant someone had exploited human blind spots, along with the cameras, to approach Laura without notice. The truth was, the three statements didn't contradict each other. They complemented one another. A girl in a hurry, a man watching, a metallic sound, a vehicle passing by. All could be pieces of the same chain of events. The police just didn't know how to assemble them in the right order yet. But from here, the official investigation moved to the next phase, determining among those three blurry figures, who saw Laura last, and more importantly, who approached her. Reconstructing the first 3 hours after Laura left the HEB back door became the investigation team's top priority. That's always the most critical phase in any disappearance. The clearer the initial minutes, the greater the chance of finding a lead. Conversely, one misplaced detail could send the entire case into a deadlock. So the lead detective ordered all officers to stop new interviews and focus entirely on freezing the time from when Laura stepped out the door until midnight. The window identified as the key gap, a marker board timeline, was set up in the store security room. All camera data, witness statements, vehicle paths, employee lists, and closing times were written on it. 9 p.m. was marked as the starting point, time Laura left the back door. From there, they went minute by minute. Problems emerged immediately. The backdoor camera footage confirmed Laura exiting, but the timestamp of the light-colored vehicle on the street camera didn't match. Between the two frames, there was a 7-minute gap with zero data. No camera recorded movement. No witness saw where Laura went. No sounds were reported. 7 minutes short in everyday terms, but in an abduction, 7 minutes is enough to move a victim from a parking lot into a vehicle, out of the lot, onto side streets, and beyond any patrol unit's pursuit range. A young investigator flipped the backdoor tape back and forth. Could the camera be delayed? He asked. The technician shook his head. No, this recorder type doesn't drift on its own. If it drifted, the whole tape would be off, not just one segment. That meant the 7-minute gap was real, not a technical glitch. When the timeline expanded to 9:10, 9:25 p.m., the picture grew messier. The east camera was blinded exactly when Laura was believed to leave the lot. If the light-colored vehicle on the street camera was involved, it passed too late relative to Laura's disappearance. Police tested the possibility that Laura walked north, but witness statements confirmed she headed to the lot edge, toward the loading area, not the street exit. No clear footprints, no confirming video, no evidence along any path to the street. The detective circled the timeline. 9 p.m. Laura leaves back door. 9 o'clock. 9:07 p.m. No camera records movement. 9:08 p.m. East camera blinded abnormally. 9:14 p.m. Street camera captures light-colored vehicle. Nothing formed a continuous chain. If Laura was approached right after exiting, why no movement on the back camera? If the mystery man was already in the delivery area, why no frame with both silhouettes? Why did the metallic impact happen exactly during the camera's blind period? And most crucially, why did all the camera incidents fall precisely at Laura's clock-out time, not earlier, not later? A veteran officer said slowly, "I don't buy coincidence." Someone knew how to dodge the cameras, or how to break them. Everyone knew what he meant. This disappearance wasn't spontaneous. It showed preparation. Another offered a different angle. But how did the perpetrator know Laura's shift that day? Schedules changed weekly. That silenced the room. Two possibilities. 1. The stalker knew Laura's schedule in advance. 2. The abductor was inside the store earlier, watching employees come and go. Both were dangerous, and both cast suspicion on people directly connected to HEB. However, when the timeline extended to 10 p.m., a bigger issue emerged. No witness after 9:15 p.m. saw Laura anywhere in town. Friends the family called that night all said they hadn't seen her all day. No restaurant confirmed a visit, no taxi, no borrowed car, no one gave her a ride, meaning, from 9 p.m. to 12 a.m., Laura was completely off the map. Police tried expanding vehicle tracing, but in 1991, Edinburg, GPS didn't exist. No clear traffic cameras for plates, no recognition systems like today. Just old analog cameras with limited angles and blurry quality. Every tool that could track a path either didn't exist or wasn't functional enough. The only things they knew, Laura didn't leave the lot on her own. Laura didn't walk to any place captured on camera. And the 7-minute gap was the key to decoding the entire case. The detective stared at the timeline and said something that made the team realize the investigation was about to escalate. Cameras don't turn themselves, lights don't blind themselves, gaps don't create themselves. Someone did this, and that was the moment Laura Martinez's disappearance was officially treated, not just as missing, but as a premeditated abduction, marking the shift to a deeper investigative phase, where every tiny detail could be evidence of a calculated plan. Right after finalizing the preliminary timeline and recognizing the 7-minute gap as decisive, the team decided to expand the search beyond HEB. The reason was clear. If Laura was removed from the lot in that gap, the perpetrator couldn't have gone far. In 7 minutes, maximum speed in the back lot and side road area only allowed travel within a 1 bus to 1.5 mile radius. This put the entire North Edinburgh area, a mix of wild grassland, irrigation canals, vacant lots, and a few small residential roads on the priority search list. At 3 p.m. that day, multiple patrol units and local volunteers began sweeping in grid formation, dividing the land into squares, and walking straight lines, looking for any ground disturbance. Hot winds blowing through the low grass made observation harder, as dry soil and flying dust easily hid drag marks or footprints, but no one gave up. In disappearances like this, the sooner evidence appeared, the greater the chance of answering, "Where did Laura go?" One officer team was sent to the irrigation canal, a long moderately deep channel, running through North Town and curving toward new housing developments. The banks were higher than the water, covered in weeds and wind-blown trash. It was a fishing spot by day, but completely quiet the previous night. An officer shone a flashlight along the bank, and immediately noticed an uneven patch of flattened grass, as if someone had stood or stepped there. The mark wasn't clear, but it didn't match typical fisherman prints. A few steps from the compressed grass, something small caught the afternoon sun with a faint silver glint, forcing an officer to bend down. It was a torn scrap of fabric, caked in dry dirt, edges frayed as if ripped hard or snagged on something sharp. At first, they thought it might be random wind-blown trash, but when picked up, the material made the crime scene tech pause. This wasn't ordinary fabric, not cotton from everyday clothes, not nylon from store uniforms. It was thick, stiff, like oil-resistant material used in industrial maintenance. The evidence officer said immediately, "Looks like HVAC tech jacket fabric, the kind refrigeration guys wear." He held it to the light. Tiny metal flecks sparkled, signs of a work environment involving air conditioning or industrial equipment. But the big question hit instantly: what did this fabric have to do with Laura? The prior scene recorded no similar fabric on Laura's shirt or bag. Her HEB job didn't involve HVAC equipment. She didn't know any maintenance techs. No family member worked that trade, meaning the scrap had no logical reason to be on her daily route. One officer frowned. Could it be from the store's AC unit tearing? A quick check showed HEB's HVAC system intact. No fabric tears, no repairs the previous night. That reinforced the theory the fabric didn't belong to the store environment. It came from someone near Laura in her final minutes, or someone who touched her. While the canal team logged and bagged the fabric, another group searched nearby grassland. At the edge of a vacant lot, they found an area of heavily compressed soil, no clear footprints, just patches sunken as if someone stood for a while, or shifted weight. Strangely, the depressions ran horizontally, like something had been set down or pressed against the ground then lifted. No blood, no Laura traces, no personal items, but the unease was palpable, as if this was a brief stop for a vehicle, or a minor part of the incident. When reports were merged with the timeline, the detective looked at the torn fabric, and saw it didn't fit any prior piece. But that mismatch made it significant. If the perpetrator had industrial AC experience, or was an HVAC tech, the statement about the man standing near delivery suddenly became chilling. The delivery area behind the store housed large cooling units. Someone familiar with it would know exactly which cameras had blind spots, where shadows fell, and where to stand to watch an employee exit. Though the fabric couldn't yet be directly tied to Laura, the team agreed it was the first real lead. Not a vague sound, not a shaky witness silhouette, but tangible evidence with material and occupational traits. Something no store employee owned. The detective marked the fabric on the board, a thick red line from 7-minute gap to HVAC fabric. No one spoke, but everyone understood the case. Now showed signs of a specialized, prepared perpetrator who could operate in areas others ignored. Though not yet linked to Laura, it opened a new investigative path. Who in 1991 Edinburg worked HVAC, and who among them was near HEB that night? As the torn fabric was sent to the lab, and the search team completed the first sweep of North Edinburg, the detective focused the entire unit on a critical step, reanalyzing the entire scene through the lens of a premeditated abduction. No longer treating this as missing for unknown reasons, the team had to adopt the heavier hypothesis that Laura didn't leave the lot alone, and her abductor had planned every move. The next morning's briefing took place in the store security room, where the timeline, crime scene photos, HVAC fabric, and a 1.5-mile HEB radius map were pinned wall to wall. The detective pointed to 3 large printed stills from the tapes. First, Laura stepping out the back door. Second, the frame right after with zero movement. Third, the inexplicably angled camera. He tapped the third photo. We have to treat this as evidence, not accident. The camera didn't turn because of wind, vibration, or equipment failure. The imaging tech confirmed, right. Someone had to stand on something to reach the mount. Camera height is about 9 feet. Whoever turned it knew exactly what they were doing. The room grew heavy, not just because someone tampered with the camera, but because it happened before Laura clocked out, meaning the perpetrator arrived early enough, knew the shift end, knew employee paths, and was ready to wait. This wasn't spontaneous or impulsive, it was planned. Next, the team analyzed the lot footprints. Close-up photos showed 3 gravel areas compressed more distinctly than the rest, large, deeper than normal depressions. Though the gravel surface made sole pattern analysis hard, the overall size let techs estimate shoe size. Big size, a tech said. Definitely not Laura's shoes, and not most female employees. Another officer added, 3 identical depressions, same size, same estimated weight, appear in sequence along Laura's path. Highly likely one man's footprints following her from a distance. Even more notable, the depression locations sat right at the light shadow edge, as if someone deliberately kept a safe distance to avoid detection. Just far enough to track Laura but not close enough for the camera. The detective noted on the board, Stalker knew exactly what the camera could and couldn't see. Another point convincing the team of preparation was the complete absence of signs Laura left the lot voluntarily. No footprints walking away from the scene. No tire tracks near her last known spot. No dropped items along a path, as in runaways or panicked exits. No witness saw Laura talking to anyone, or getting into any vehicle. That completely rules out runaway, the detective said. No signs she left on her own. No meetup, no extra belongings, No phone, no spare jacket, no reason for Laura to leave home at that hour. A young officer asked what if someone she knew called her out. The imaging tech shook his head. If it was someone familiar, why turn the camera? Why create a blind spot? And why large tracking footprints right from the back door? The question silenced the room. No one had an immediate answer, but everyone understood. Every trace pointed to one conclusion. Laura didn't walk into the darkness, she was led into it. Police continued analyzing additional scene indicators. Asterisk. No clear signs of a struggle, meaning the approach happened extremely fast, or Laura was taken completely by surprise. Asterisk. No screams or calls for help, reported from surrounding neighborhoods, meaning the approach and removal took place in under 10 seconds. Asterisk. None of Laura's personal items, purse or keys, were discarded. This shows the perpetrator controlled the situation quickly and highly effectively. The entire chain of events, from the turned camera, the mystery man near the delivery area, the metallic impact sound, the repeated large shoe prints, to the HVAC fabric, all carried one common message: the perpetrator prepared. The perpetrator knew the area inside out. The perpetrator knew the cameras. The perpetrator knew Laura. The veteran detective sighed as he stood in front of the notes board. This wasn't someone random. This wasn't a drifter. This is someone with motive and a plan. And that was the moment the team wrote, in the boldest letters the case had seen so far, at the very top of the status board: abduction, premeditated. There was no longer any hope that Laura had simply gotten lost, or had a minor accident. No longer any chance she left Edinburgh voluntarily. What the scene told them was crystal clear. What happened behind the HEB back door that night was a premeditated abduction carried out by someone police didn't yet have a name for, but who had stalked and chosen the exact moment Laura stepped into unobserved darkness. As the investigation shifted to premeditated abduction, the lead detective ordered a full re-screening of every employee who worked the night shift, not just those who worked directly with Laura, but anyone who even passed the back door area near her clock-out time. It was during this screening that a seemingly unimportant figure suddenly became the most critical piece yet: the night janitor, who worked in areas few people noticed. His name was Rafael Espinoza, a quiet man around 50, small build, rarely spoke, usually worked alone in the warehouse and back hallways. When police first questioned him that morning, Rafael only remembered very general things. He took out trash at 8 o'clock, wiped the hallway at 8:45, then cleaned the back break room. Nothing unusual, but after overhearing coworkers talking about the turned camera and large footprints in the dark, Rafael approached an officer on his own and asked to tell something that might matter. Police took him into the small break room and closed the door. Rafael sat down, calloused hands clasped, eyes on the floor. "I'm not sure it's related," he began, voice slightly shaking, "but I think I saw someone that night, before Laura got off work." The room went silent. The detective leaned forward. "Who did you see? Where?" Rafael took a breath. "At the far end of the parking lot, near the back camera. I've been out to dump a small trash can and saw someone was standing in the dark." That statement got everyone's immediate attention. It hit the two biggest anomalies: darkness and the camera. "Describe him," the detective ordered. Rafael frowned, trying to recall. "I didn't see a face. He was backlit near the fence, but I remember tall, broad shoulders, and..." He paused, as if afraid he'd misremembered. "He was wearing gloves." "Gloves?" an officer repeated, almost disbelieving. "Yes, dark-colored gloves, not regular work gloves. I saw them catch the light a little when he moved. He stood very still, like he was waiting for someone." That information made the detective jump out of his chair. If that man was there before Laura clocked out, it meant the perpetrator was on scene before the victim. This was no longer a crime of opportunity. This was an ambush. The detective had Rafael describe the exact position where he stood, which direction he faced, close to the camera, or the exit. Rafael pointed on the map. "Here, right by the turned camera pole. I remember because as I walked past, I heard gravel shift lightly under someone's foot. Did you hear talking? No. No other sounds. Did he look at you? Raphael shook his head. No, like he didn't care I was there. Or was trying not to react. A text scribbled fast. Man's position 100% matches camera blind spot. The detective pressed. Why didn't you mention this yesterday? Raphael looked down. I didn't think it mattered. I didn't want to cause trouble. And, honestly, I was scared. I had a feeling he was up to no good. What if I was wrong? The hesitation of an ordinary janitor had just become the key that opened a new investigative direction. It also reminded police that in this case, every tiny detail could be a puzzle piece. The detective immediately ordered the tape rechecked at the time. Raphael said he took out trash. On the footage, Raphael's silhouette does walk past, but behind him, exactly where he described, the turned camera captured nothing but absolute darkness. It sent chills through the team. Someone was standing there. The camera didn't see him. Raphael saw the gloves glint, and minutes later, Laura vanished. The forensic tech added one more analysis. If he was wearing gloves, he probably knew he'd have to touch the camera, or something else. That statement made everything click into place, like the right puzzle piece. Asterisk gloves hide fingerprints. Asterisk standing before the camera turned or tampered with it. Asterisk waiting for Laura knew her clock out time. Everything matched the premeditation theory. Another officer said quietly, if he was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing gloves, and standing exactly where the camera needed to be blinded, high chance he's the one who turned the camera before Laura walked out. No one argued. The veteran detective concluded, the man Raphael saw wasn't a witness, he's suspect number one, and the fact he was there before Laura got off confirms what we suspected. He wasn't just present, he was waiting. When the information was added to the report, a thick red line appeared on the board. Perpetrator arrived on scene before victim. Intentional. Prepared. This discovery changed the entire way police viewed the case. No longer a possible chance encounter or impulsive act. Laura didn't fall into the hands of a random predator. She faced someone who had calculated every minute, every camera angle, every stretch of darkness, and the gloved man Raphael saw was the first real shadow to step out of this case's mystery. The first months after Laura vanished were the most intense, stressful, and suffocating Edinburg had ever seen. But by 1992, as the major leads dried up, the case began slipping into every investigator's nightmare, drowning in false tips. Misinformation didn't just slow the investigation, it derailed the entire strategy to find the perpetrator. After police released Laura's photo and the disappearance timeline, the investigative unit's phones rang non-stop for months. South Texas is vast, dotted with small border towns, and anyone who saw a young woman walking alone thought that could be Laura. Sightings were reported from McAllen, then Mission, Weslaco, Harlingen, even as far as Corpus Christi. Some swore they saw Laura at a gas station, others at a diner, still others walking on South Padre Island Beach. But every time police rushed to the location, every call led to a completely different woman. Wrong person, wrong identification, wrong timing. The worst part, the sheer volume forced police to spend resources checking each one. Over roughly a year, more than 60 Laura sightings were logged, but none held real value. A long-haired woman on a bus became Laura. A girl arguing with her boyfriend in a Walmart parking lot got reported. A fast food worker in McAllen broke down crying when questioned because she looked exactly like the victim. The more sightings, the more chaos. Not only false tips, some witness statements began to change, making the case even murkier. A customer who originally said he saw a man in dark clothing near delivery later, 6 months on, remembered the man might have been wearing light colors. A delivery driver who heard a metallic impact later called it a trash can being dumped. Store employees, under psychological pressure for months, started remembering vaguely, mixing up sequences, or blending events from other nights into the night Laura disappeared. Statements changed not because people wanted to lie. Human memory simply isn't built to retain perfect detail after a year. But for police, Every small shift made the already fragile timeline less reliable. It was in this chaotic period that the investigative team split into two opposing theories. The first, led by the case detective, believed Laura had been abducted and was most likely no longer alive. Their evidence signs of a struggle at the scene, tampered camera, mystery man in the dark, HVAC fabric, the suspicious 7-minute gap. To them this was clearly a planned abduction. The perpetrator likely removed Laura from town that same night. The second, led by a younger detective named Javier Ruiz, saw it differently. Ruiz believed Laura could still be alive, not because of solid evidence, but because so many sightings partially matched her description. Reports of a young woman with an older man in West Laco, a girl who looks like Laura working at a diner, a girl running from a convenience store, all made Ruiz think Laura might be held captive or forced to move. Ruiz pushed hard in that direction, contacting highway patrol, checking every young woman report on interstate routes, reaching out to Texas border towns, even comparing Laura to victims in human trafficking cases at the time. The problem, nothing proved Ruiz wrong, but nothing proved him right either. Tension grew inside the unit. Some thought Ruiz was too optimistic. Others feared that if Laura was alive somewhere, they were wasting time looking for a body. And so the already difficult case was pulled to two extremes, searching for a living person, or hunting a perpetrator who had taken her. Time passed, and by 1993, no new physical evidence had surfaced. Footprints too vague, HVAC fabric, unmatched to anyone local. Cameras yielded nothing more, no ransom calls, no anonymous letters, no financial activity tied to Laura. Worse, witnesses who gave statements now, 1 or 2 years later, misremembered even more. Details faded. The customer who saw the mystery man was no longer sure if the man stood by delivery or near a container. Rafael, the janitor, began doubting his own memory, even though his initial statement had been one of the strongest pieces. By 1994, 3 years after the night Laura vanished, the case was almost completely stalled. No direction showed progress, no new evidence, no suspect, no breakthrough. Local press called it the vanishing girl case. The family still put up missing posters on power poles, but the paper had faded in the sun, torn by wind and rain. Police kept the file on the front shelf of the detective division, but they knew in their hearts, without fresh evidence, Laura Martinez would forever remain just a name on the cold case list. 3 years passed with no answers, and the perpetrator was still out there, silent, invisible, leaving no further trace. In 1994, when the investigation had hit a dead end, and the team had nearly given up hope of any new physical evidence, one small but fateful decision was made: re-inventory every single piece of evidence in the case. The process was routine internal procedure, basically administrative to ensure nothing had been lost. But during that seemingly tedious recheck, one detail no one had noticed before became the thing that changed the entire fate of the case: a microscopic bloodstain on the pocket of Laura's work uniform. It was the uniform shirt, collected the night the family reported her missing. When police searched Laura's room for signs she had run away, the faded red HEB shirt had been sitting in the dirty clothes hamper. No one suspected it. No one thought it held any clue. And at that early stage, police were focused only on what Laura carried when she left the store, not clothes left at home. So the shirt was set aside. During the 1994 inventory, crime scene technician Angela Ramirez was the first to notice something odd. When she opened the evidence bag and turned the pocket inside out, she saw a tiny brown speck, no larger than a pinhead. But what stood out was its location. The lower pocket seam, where Laura rarely reached, it was tucked deep, as if it got there when the shirt was pulled or gripped tightly. Angela put on gloves and examined it under a magnifying glass. Not food stain, not normal dirt, she told her colleague. It looks like old blood. Another technician leaned in to look, then shrugged. If it's blood, it could just be Laura's. Angela shot back immediately. If it were Laura's blood, why is it inside the pocket lining? She didn't have any injury the day she disappeared, right? No one had an answer. No one had ever thought this shirt was connected to the disappearance, because Laura wasn't wearing it that night. But a blood stain, even a pinhead-sized one, still had to be tested. However, DNA testing in the mid-90s wasn't what it is today. CTR short tandem repeat technology was still in its infancy, and PCR polymerase chain reaction wasn't refined enough to amplify such a tiny sample. And this wasn't just small, it was nearly microscopic. Angela sent it to the Hidalgo County lab, where they ran the basic tests available, confirm whether it was actually blood, confirm whether it was human blood, attempt blood type comparison. The results came back and left Angela frozen. It was blood, human. But it did not match Laura Martinez's blood type. That meant someone with this blood type had contact with Laura's shirt, or the blood got on the shirt without her knowledge, or it was directly tied to the night she disappeared. But because the shirt was in the dirty laundry hamper, no one knew how long the stain had been there. No one knew the last time Laura wore it. No one knew if it came from work or from someone else at the store. And the biggest problem remained: DNA profiling was impossible. A forensic examiner summarized the result: sample too small, insufficient material for amplification. PCR at this time only works with larger quantities. We cannot generate a DNA profile from a speck like this, so the blood stain, despite its importance, was literally frozen. It couldn't be used to identify a suspect. It couldn't be linked to anyone. It couldn't even reveal the donor's sex, age, or biological traits. After weeks of debate, the detective ordered the sample placed in the police department's cold storage vault. This was standard preservation procedure for major cases, in case future technology could analyze what was currently impossible. In the final 1994 report, the note about the shirt was only a few short lines. Victim's shirt pocket contains minute blood stain, not belonging to victim. Sample insufficient for DNA testing with current technology. Sealed and stored. No one knew that the technological scandal of the era, the limitations of 1990s DNA testing, had inadvertently preserved the case's most crucial clue. If the stain had been slightly larger, they might have used it all up on old tests and completely consumed the sample. If someone hadn't noticed it during inventory, it would have been dismissed as dirt and ignored. If it hadn't been tucked deep in the pocket seam, it might have washed away. But it wasn't. That pinhead-sized blood stain was discovered, documented, and stored in evidence box 17B92, alongside Laura's photos, scene maps, and the HVAC fabric report. And then everything went silent. No one mentioned it again. No technology was powerful enough to read it. No one knew the mystery man's DNA had been sitting in a lab freezer for nearly 20 years. From 1994 to 2010, no one opened that evidence box. No one knew that tiny blood speck would one day become the key to solving the entire case. But at the time, it was just a meaningless brown dot, and the Laura Martinez case sank deeper into the darkness of what seemed like an unsolvable cold case. In 2005, more than 13 years after the night Laura vanished from the HEB back lot, the case had become a familiar name on the Edinburg Police Department's cold case list. The original witnesses had moved away, memories had shifted, or they were no longer certain of anything. The detective who led the case in the 90s had retired. The file had passed through 3 generations of investigators with no solid lid to reopen it. But that fall, something significant happened. The Hidalgo County Lab launched a program to retest archived DNA samples using modern STR technology far superior to the 1990s. The list included dozens of old evidence boxes, among them box 17B92, containing the HVAC fabric, crime scene photos, and crucially, Laura's uniform shirt pocket with its almost invisible blood speck from the time it was collected. When the technician opened the box, the label "minute blood stain, insufficient for 1994 technology" jumped out. Lab director Monica Villarreal decided to put the sample on the priority retest list. "If we can recover DNA from samples this small," she said, "a lot of cold cases could be solved." The first STR attempt was run in December 2005. They extracted whatever remained of that dust-sized blood speck, amplified it, and ran it on the new system. Result: DNA confirmed real, profile confirmed human, and most importantly, not Laura Martinez. For the first time in 13 years, police had something resembling a genetic fingerprint of the perpetrator. But that hope was instantly crushed by the familiar line, appeared on Monica's computer screen. CODIS search result: no match, no DNA, in the entire National Criminal Database, matched this mystery man. He had never been arrested, never been sampled, or simply existed outside any system. There was nothing more police could do with a no-match result. Moreover, because the remaining DNA was so minuscule, the analysis had nearly exhausted the entire sample. When Monica checked again, she only shook her head. "We can't run it a second time. There's nothing left." This sparked internal debate. Some investigators argued the DNA should have been preserved for even newer technology, instead of using it all on one STR run. Others countered, "If we don't test now, we might lose the chance forever." But the debate no longer mattered. The sample was gone. The case had its first glimmer of light in 13 years, and was immediately plunged back into darkness when CODIS refused to identify the perpetrator. In the 2005 report, then lead detective Henry Soto wrote one short, bitter line: "DNA profile unidentified. Insufficient evidence to reopen case. Case remains inactive." Yet the case was not fully closed. By regulation, every year, or whenever new technology emerged, cold cases had to be reviewed. But 2006, 2009 was an especially tough period. South Texas was dealing with a wave of drug-related crimes, human trafficking, and illegal border crossings. Investigative resources were stretched thin, budgets cut, cold cases, always last in line, were essentially frozen. For 3 straight years, almost no one touched the Laura Martinez file. It sat in the second drawer on the left of the storage room, labeled in faded black marker, "Missing Person 1991, Potential Abduction." No one opened it. No one reviewed it. No one remembered the details like the original detectives once had. That is the erosion of time, the greatest enemy of every missing person case. In 2008, Monica suggested uploading the bloodstains DNA profile to the supplemental offender list DNA system, profiles with no known owner, for future comparison with other cases. But the system was brand new, incomplete, and only a few major labs in Dallas and Houston were connected. Hidalgo County wasn't on the list. By 2009, some younger detectives proposed reopening the case because many cold cases were being solved with newer STR tech, but Laura Martinez wasn't among them. The reason was simple and brutal. The only DNA sample had been too small to create additional profiles. No independent DNA sample, no retesting, no reanalysis, no justification to reopen. Legally, the entire case now rested on non-reliable witness statements, blurry camera footage, non-enriched HVAC fabric, and a blood stain that matched no one. None of it strong enough to return the case to active status. And then, on March 14, 2010, a routine decision was signed by the new investigations chief, Case 91 EDBLM, officially classified as cold case. No further action until new evidence or technological advancement. The Laura Martinez case, once the talk of all Edinburg, was officially sealed in the cold case files, with virtually zero chance of reopening. No one knew, no one could have imagined, that just a few years later, the very genetic technology they had desperately hoped for in 2005 would drag the case out of its deepest darkness. But in 2010, everything was locked in silence. No suspect, no new witnesses, no DNA match, no answers. And the perpetrator, the man who turned the camera, wore gloves, waited for Laura in the dark, was still out there, untouched for nearly 2 decades. The year 2011 began with what seemed like a small change, but turned out to be the biggest turning point in the entire case. The Hidalgo County lab hired a new forensic technician, Elena Marquez, a woman in her 30s, who had previously worked on an ancestry DNA research program in Austin. Elena was known for 2 traits: obsessive attention to detail and absolute belief that no case was truly cold as long as a single DNA particle remained in storage. In her first days on the job, Elena made it a personal habit to review all archived DNA evidence from decades-old cold cases, especially those without a suspect profile or that had returned no CODIS hits. The Laura Martinez file was on that list. Evidence box 17B92 was pulled from the shelf. The thin layer of dust on the lid showed it hadn't been touched in years. When Elena opened the box and reread the 2005 report, her eyes stopped on two lines: DNA extracted, non-match, sample exhausted. The report stated the DNA had been almost completely used up in the STR test. What remained was too little for further analysis. To most technicians, that meant the case was dead in the water, but to Elena, sample exhausted only made her frown. It had been true in 2005, but in 2011, science had turned the page. Between 2003 and 2011, PCR had leapt past its original limits. Techniques for extracting degraded and microscopic DNA, once theoretical when the crime occurred, were now routine in major labs. Most importantly, Elena had worked on a research project involving SNPs, single nucleotide polymorphisms, a method that went deeper than traditional STR, allowing family tree building, tracing distant relatives, and crucially, identifying individuals from extremely small old or degraded samples. Looking at the tiny blood speck in evidence bag 17B92C, Elena thought, in 1991, this was useless. In 2005, it was almost useless. But in 2011, it might be enough. That very afternoon, Elena examined the blood stain again under a specialized microscope. Only a microscopic remnant remained from the previous extraction, but with new techniques, that could be enough. She made a note and immediately informed lab director Monica Villarreal, the same Monica who had discovered the stain in 1994. Monica came over, looked through the microscope, and after a few seconds, simply nodded. If anyone can do this, it's you. But analyzing old DNA isn't simple. It required equipment the Hidalgo lab didn't have: next-generation sequencers, molecular extraction systems for degraded tissue, and especially an experienced genealogical analysis team skilled at reading SNP data. Elena proposed sending the sample to two facilities capable of the work: the Austin Forensic Institute, or private lab Orchid Cellmark, specialists in ancient DNA decoding. But this was evidence from an unsolved case, and shipping it out of county required approval from the Hidalgo County District Attorney's Office. The debate dragged on for nearly a month. Some argued the case was too old and viable DNA unlikely. Others worried the remaining sample was so small that transport could destroy it completely. But Elena stood firm: if we don't try now, the sample will keep degrading. If we try, we have a chance. If we don't, we lose it forever. That argument finally won them over. In March 2012, the sample was packaged under strict protocol, placed in a chilled preservation tube, double-sealed, and shipped to Austin. The submission form read, "Request SNP extraction, degraded sample from cold case 1991. Shipping took days, but waiting for results took months. The sample was tiny, degraded by time, and especially difficult because the blood was on fabric that had been washed. The Austin lab called back, saying they had to perform multiple extractions to gather enough DNA. In July 2012, they sent the first report: "We have fragments, very low quantity, but viable for further sequencing." That was good news, but not yet the breakthrough. The sequencing team spent another 5 months, building the full SNP profile. Every DNA fragment had to be pieced together like a puzzle torn into thousands of microscopic pieces. Some days Elena received only a short email from Austin, recovered additional 22 SNPs. Other days, sample shows severe degradation, trying alternative protocol. In 2013, a 42-page report arrived. Elena opened it at her desk, under the pale fluorescent lights and aging AC hum. One line made her stop breathing: full SNP profile successfully generated. It was the first time anyone had ever obtained a complete genetic profile from Laura Martinez bloodstain, and more importantly, it was the first complete genome of the perpetrator. But there was a new problem. In 2013, forensic genealogy was still in its infancy. GED Match Pro didn't exist. Genealogical databases were not yet open to law enforcement. Even with a full SNP profile, there was nowhere to compare it. A new science had revived old DNA, but it still had no place to connect and find its owner. So the file was resealed, placed in high-security storage, and accompanied by a report with a suspended but hopeful conclusion: store securely. Future genealogical databases may allow kinship match. Throughout 2014, 2015, and 2016, Elena occasionally pulled the Laura file, reviewed the results, and waited. Every attempted CODIS scan, using STR, still returned the same familiar line: no match. At that time, forensic genealogy was still embryonic. The world had not yet heard of breakthroughs like the Golden State Killer. No one was using family trees to catch criminals. Only in 2017, when a national conference in Phoenix presented research on using SNPs to identify relatives of unidentified victims, did Elena instantly think of Laura. She called Austin and asked, "Do you still have the 2013 SNP file?" The answer: "We still have it. It has never been used in any analysis." Elena knew the moment had come. In 2018, the Austin lab announced they were joining the beta test of a new genealogical platform that could compare SNP profiles against public uploads from people researching their family trees. When the list of eligible cases for the trial run was released, Elena immediately submitted Case 17B92, Laura Martinez abduction, SNP profile recovered 2013. For the first time in nearly 3 decades, the perpetrator's DNA in the Laura Martinez case was placed where it could finally make a real connection. 30 years after Laura vanished, the seed of a final answer had been planted. No one knew yet that it would lead them straight to the perpetrator, but one thing was certain: the old DNA had come back to life, and it was waiting to be matched to the name Edinburg had been longing for almost 30 years. The year 2019 ushered in an entirely new era for forensic genetics in the United States. Just 1 year after the Golden State Killer was caught using genealogical DNA, labs across the country began joining forensic genealogy platforms, including GED Match Pro, the version built specifically for law enforcement. For Elena Marquez, this was the moment she had been waiting for since 2011. At last, the SNP profile from the Laura Martinez case, trapped in storage for 6 years, could be compared against millions of voluntary DNA uploads. In March 2019, Elena uploaded the unknown male SNP profile from the Laura case to GED Match Pro, with a short description: unknown male contributor, cold case, abduction, South Texas. She clicked Submit and watched the small line appear on screen: processing 1-2 weeks. 2 weeks later, the Austin lab called back. The analyst's voice carried a rare excitement: "Elena, we have matches, not 1, 7. 7 distant matches, ranging from 3rd to 5th cousins, not close relatives, but enough to build a large family tree." The report showed one thing all 7 had in common: they all belonged to the same lineage, the Roldan family. This was the first clearly directional discovery since 1991. No more vague statements, no more faceless shadows, no more footprints lost in gravel. Now they had something no perpetrator could dodge: bloodline. The Roldan family, not a huge clan, but scattered across South Texas. As the genealogical data poured in, Elena and the Austin team began the hardest part: building the tree. The matches from GED Match Pro included Mara's 2 people living in Brownsville, 1 in Kingsville, 1 in Robstown, 1 in San Benito, 1 in Mission, 1 in Laredo, all shared common ancestors from Hidalgo County in the early 1900s. But because these were distant matches, none could be the perpetrator himself. Using birth records and genealogical files, Elena started constructing a massive tree, beginning with the ancestral couple, Jose Ignacio Roldan, 1897, 1966, and Elvira Roldan, 1901, 1978. They had 6 children. Those children had 17 grandchildren. Those 17 grandchildren produced nearly 60 great-grandchildren. Now the forensic team's job wasn't to find the perpetrator directly, but to find men in this lineage, who lived in or near Edinburg, in 1991 and were the right age to commit the crime. First round of elimination, age and timeline. Elena compiled a list of 32 Roldan men in the right age range, born 1950, 1975. Then the list was narrowed. Mars 5 had died before 1991, 3 were living outside Texas when Laura disappeared, 2 were serving overseas in the military, 4 were removed because their SNP data didn't match strongly enough to their place in the tree. From 32 names, 18 remained. Police then eliminated 12 more. Clear alibis. Not present in Edinburg in 1991, too distant in the tree, match confidence too low, outside reasonable offender age range, that left 6 Roldan men as potential suspects. Second round of elimination, criminal records, and 1991 residents. Police pulled 1991 residency records for each. Results: 1 lived in Harlingen, 2 lived in McAllen, 1 in Donna, 1 in Raymondville, 1 had lived and worked in Edinburg. In 1991, that name made Elena freeze. Stephen Roldan, born 1961, occupation, HVAC technician, 1991 address, less than 1.3 miles from the Edinburg HEB. Elena immediately pulled the original 1991 police files. What she found sent a chill down her spine. The name Stephen Roldan had appeared on the list of contractors who serviced the store's refrigeration system in the summer of 1991, a name forgotten long ago because no one thought an HVAC tech could be involved, a name that never made the original suspect list because there was no reason to suspect him, a name who had been inside the exact area where the big cooling unit sat, where the camera was turned. The HVAC fabric scrap, found in 1991, the dark gloves Raphael saw, the camera blind spot, the shadows near the cooling units. Suddenly everything lined up in a clear chain. Checking the remaining 5, though Stephen stood out, Elena still had to rule out the other 5 before concluding. Harlingen man, petty theft record, but in 1991, was with his wife at the hospital for a newborn. Hospital proof. 2 McAllen men, 1 arrested for DUI in 1990, the other a long-haul trucker with logbooks, proving he wasn't in Edinburg the week Laura vanished. Donna man, SNP match too weak, likely a very distant branch. Raymondville man, prior bar fight conviction, but indirect DNA comparison through relatives ruled him out. Thus, after nearly 30 years since Laura disappeared, after thousands of hours of analysis, searching and screening, only 1 man remained who could have left the blood on Laura's shirt. That man was Stephen Manuel Roldan. Why had Stephen never been suspected before? Elena listed 3 main reasons in her report. 1. He wasn't personally acquainted with Laura. Laura worked front end. Stephen serviced the walk-in coolers. Their areas rarely overlapped. 2. He had no criminal record, no violence, nothing in CODIS, an invisible person. 3. He worked freelance contracts, not on HEB's official employee roster. Came in for a few weeks in summer, then left. But the evidence told a different story. Maya's fabric matching industry uniforms. The gloved man standing in the dark, camera turned near the cooling units. Large adult male footprints. Stephen's blood on Laura's shirt. Piece by piece, everything finally fit, like the case had simply been waiting nearly 3 decades for technology to read the silent confession hidden in that 1991 pinhead-sized bloodstain. From indirect suspects priority 1 suspect, Elena sent the full forensic genealogy report to Edinburg PD in October 2019. The key line was boxed in red. Based on genealogical triangulation, the DNA most likely belongs to Stephen Manuel Roldan. The moment cold case detective Carlos Esquivel read it, he shot up from his chair. "Call Austin," he said. "Have them triple-check every link." Austin rechecked for 2 months. After ruling out every possible exception, they sent a short but earth-shaking email. "We concur. 99.9987% probability that the DNA belongs to Stephen Roldan." A name resurfaced after 28 years. For nearly 3 decades, Stephen Roldan had lived a quiet life, moved several times, never committed a serious crime, worked HVAC jobs across South Texas, Never once had his DNA collected, but nothing escapes genetic genealogy. Not because Stephen himself uploaded his DNA, but because a distant third cousin had. Thanks to that cousin's innocent upload, thanks to Elena's determination, thanks to a blood speck preserved for almost 30 years, the Laura Martinez case finally had its first real suspect, and his name, Stephen Roldan, would become the center of the biggest investigation in Edinburg history since 1991. However, identification through genealogy was only the beginning. To arrest him, police needed a direct DNA sample, undeniable proof, the final link. But that would only happen in the year that followed, when the hunt for Stephen Roldan officially began, and Edinburg stepped into the moment of confronting the shadow that had haunted them for nearly 30 years. When the name Stephen Manuel Roldan was written on the Edinburg PD whiteboard as suspect number 1, based on DNA genealogy analysis, the first thing the cold case team had to do was not go looking for him, but dig back through everything he had ever touched in the past, down to the tiniest details that once seemed harmless. Detective Carlos Esquivel reopened every box, every folder, and especially the paperwork that back in 1991, no one thought mattered. The case was almost 3 decades old, but Carlos believed that if Stephen had ever left a trace, it would be buried somewhere in those filing cabinets, forgotten among yellowed pages. The first clue surfaced by pure chance, yet it was devastatingly important. Stephen Roldan had been inside that HEB in the exact summer of 1991. An old invoice, 28-year-old paper, dragged Stephen back to the crime scene. On November 27, 2019, Esquivel found an accordion file shoved to the very bottom of the HEB Maintenance 1991-1993 cabinet. Inside were dozens of old repair invoices, mostly refrigeration work, compressor maintenance, coil cleaning, fan replacement, and among them, one sheet folded in quarters, browned with age, water-stained Roldan cooling and repair services. Invoice #4421 service date June, August 1991, location HEB, Edinburg back dock refrigeration unit. Roldan's name sat right at the top. Carlos froze for several seconds. It felt like someone had just lifted a concrete block off his chest. The note at the bottom was even worse. Unit vibration, camera bracket loosened, adjusted mount, camera bracket, camera mount. Esquivel immediately photographed the invoice and sent it to the Austin lab. Elena Marquez replied, in under 2 minutes. This is not coincidence. Roldan had access to the exact area where the camera was turned the night Laura disappeared. Roldan appeared on the technician list, but no one paid attention. In 1991, the original team had worked with store management and collected the night shift employee list, including a short list of contractors who had come in for repairs. Roldan was mentioned only in a faint note. Summer HVAC contractor, Roldan, don't remember face. Never in customer areas. The reasons he was never thoroughly investigated were simple. 1. No one remembered his face. 2. HVAC contractor, seasonal, came and went. 3. No witness ever saw him with Laura. 4. No criminal record, no DNA in CODIS. 5. And finally, no one thought the refrigeration guy could be connected to a turned camera. In the first 3 weeks of 1991, the original team prioritized the usual suspects, acquaintances, Myers' regular customers, Myers' co-workers, Myers' anyone who had spoken to Laura, Myers' anyone causing trouble around the store. A lone HVAC tech working behind the cooling units didn't fit a single category. The file from that year contained exactly one line: unable to locate Roldan for follow-up. Job complete, left town. No one knew where he lived, who else he worked for, or how he left Edinburgh, and so his name was tossed aside, vanishing from the investigative radar for nearly 30 years. Additional evidence: refrigeration repair times overlapped perfectly with Laura's shift end. Esquivel and Elena analyzed the invoice together. It listed 3 specific dates: August 4, 1991, arrival 6:52 p.m., departure 9:41 p.m. August 11, 1991, Arrival 7:18 p.m. Departure 10:12 p.m. August 18, 1991. Arrival 6:30 p.m. Departure 9:59 p.m. Laura disappeared on August 18, 1991, clocking out at 9 p.m. Stephen signed out of the maintenance area at 9:59 p.m., but if he was waiting for Laura in the lot, the timing lined up perfectly with the anomaly timeline. Elena placed the two timelines side by side. Stephen Roldan presents timeline 6:30 p.m., arrives at back cooling units, 9 p.m. Laura clocks out 9 o'clock, 9:07 p.m., 7-minute camera gap, 9:59 p.m. Roldan signs out of HEB. Everything matched, to a chilling degree. If he was working on the back units, he would have access to the rear employee door, knew the exact layout of cooling equipment and cameras, easily reach the dark zone where the camera was turned, and most importantly, know when employees exited the back door. No one expected that dusty old invoice to hold the answer. No one remembered his face. The problem with every investigation back then, in 1991, there was no Facebook, no photos, no digitized personnel files. Seasonal workers like Roldan were practically ghosts. No image, no ID service, no sign-in logs with photos. Carlos pulled the store's old sign-in ledger. The page for 0818 showed one line, Roldan cooling, signed in 6:34 p.m., signature barely readable, a scrawled almost illegible signature, like someone just going through the motions. No driver's license number, no license plate, no photo ID. A night shift assistant manager interviewed in 1991 had said, and the transcript still existed, HVAC guy, tall, maybe, I don't remember his face. He worked outside. And that was it. A tall man wearing gloves standing in the dark. A man no one could clearly recall. A man present at the exact place, at the exact time, but because no one remembered his face, he became invisible. Roldan and the turned camera, coincidence or method. Esquivel found a small note in the 1991 HEB technician report. Camera bracket appeared loose during HVAC maintenance earlier this month. A detail forgotten for 28 years. No one asked why the bracket was loose, no one checked who had touched it. Back then it was treated as a simple technical issue, but now, the connection was crystal clear. Camera turned the exact night Laura vanished. Camera mounted directly above the cooling units. Roldan servicing those units that night. Dark gloves, as Raphael described, standard for HVAC techs, torn HVAC fabric, found near the North Canal, and DNA from a Roldan on Laura's shirt pocket. Esquivel wrote in his report, camera bracket loosened equal sign point of manipulation. Only one person had reason plus physical access, Stephen Roldan. Reconstruction of the night of August 18, 1991, based on new files, using the invoice, sign-in ledger and forensic timeline data, the team built the most likely scenario. 6:30 p.m., Roldan arrives at HEB to service refrigeration. 2. He works in the back, near the cooling units and camera. 3. He observes the routine of employees exiting the back door. 4. Before 9 p.m., he turns the camera away. Raphael sees the gloved shadow. 5. 9 p.m., Laura walks out the back door. 6. 9 o'clock, 9:07 p.m., camera records no movement of Laura leaving the lot. 7. In that gap, Roldan likely approached, subdued, and moved Laura into the dark near the units. 8. 9:59 p.m., he signs out of the store as if nothing happened. Raphael had seen him, the camera didn't, because he himself had turned it. The HVAC fabric tore off when he dragged something over the fence or through the grass, and the blood, the perpetrator's only direct trace, ended up on Laura's shirt pocket after close contact. Why did it take nearly 30 years to see him clearly? Esquivel wrote the answer in the case review, because everything in the case was vague, only the DNA was truth, and DNA didn't get a voice until 2019. It wasn't bad police work, it wasn't faulty witnesses, it was because Roldan was just a seasonal technician, no photos, no ID, no employment records, No one remembered his face, no CODIS, no genealogical DNA, no comparison sample for 28 years. The Laura Martinez case was stuck simply because the perpetrator was invisible, until forensic genealogy dragged him back into the light. 2019 internal conclusion. At the end of the file re-examination, Esquivel concluded, Roldan was present, Roldan had access, Roldan had opportunity, Roldan left DNA. That was enough to move him from indirect suspect to official suspect, but to arrest him, police needed one more thing, a fresh direct DNA sample from Roldan himself. That would be the task of the next phase, the hunt for the man who had vanished from the radar for nearly 30 years. When the name Stephen Manuel Roldan became the official suspect after the 2019 genealogical analysis, the cold case team didn't rush out to find him. What they needed first was to dismantle his 1991 alibi, the statement no one paid attention to back then, but which had now become the most critical piece. That night I was home. That was what Roldan told an HEB manager in a late August 1991 internal phone call, when the store rang to ask about upcoming refrigeration service dates. The call wasn't to verify an alibi, it was just scheduling, yet it ended up in the night manager's handover notes, and was therefore seized by police. No one scrutinized it because Roldan wasn't on the suspect list. They simply collected the note and filed it away. In 2019, that statement written on a yellowed scrap of paper became a fatal flaw. Alibi, I was home. But the invoice proved he was at HEB. While cross-referencing old records, Esquivel located the maintenance invoice for August 18, 1991, clearly stating, arrival, 6:30 p.m., departure, 9:59 p.m., location, back dock refrigeration unit, HEB Edinburgh. That was the exact day Laura disappeared. This created a direct contradiction. Roldan claimed he was home all evening, but the invoice proved he was working at the store right when Laura clocked out. A normal person might misremember, and it could be overlooked. But for a suspect, it was evidence of a deliberate lie. Elena wrote in the forensic report, Roldan's alibi is completely destroyed. He could not have been home while his own company records, signed by him, confirm he was standing at HEB. No one could dispute the sign-in/out times. The scrawled signature on the 1991 invoice was examined by a forensic handwriting analyst, who confirmed, T's signature on the 1991 invoice matches signatures on Stephen's later employment records. 12 morphological points of similarity, in slant and pressure, meaning, Roldan himself signed that he was there until 9:59 p.m. Laura clocked out at 9 p.m. The 7-minute camera gap from 9 o'clock, 9:07 p.m. was when she vanished. Distance from the cooling units to the parking lot, only 48 steps. Evidence overlooked in storage, the HVAC fabric scrap. When the case was revived after the genealogical breakthrough, Esquivel ordered a full forensic re-evaluation of all 1991 physical evidence, including the torn HVAC fabric found near the North Edinburgh Canal. Originally, the fabric had only been analyzed for basic material. No one matched it to any uniform, because 1. No one suspected an HVAC contractor. 2. No 1991 records existed of refrigeration company uniforms. 3. No information on what uniform brand Roldan used, but in 2019, Elena decided to retest it using modern fabric microspectroscopy and commercial sourcing comparison. She sent the sample to an industrial materials lab in Houston. 3 weeks later, the conclusion left the entire team speechless. This fabric was used exclusively in HVAC maintenance uniforms by 2 companies, Roldan Cooling and Repair, Texas, and Montoya Refrigeration, Arizona. A rare fabric, used by only 2 places, and what made the report feel like a knife thrust. Montoya Refrigeration operated only in Arizona. Roldan Cooling was the sole Texas user of this fabric. Furthermore, they pinpointed the exact uniform generation by thread pattern and weave, model 873 TX uniform, manufactured 1989, 1993, only 42 units sold to Roldan Cooling. 42 uniforms, 1 single company, and one of those uniforms, was found near where Laura may have been taken. No longer speculation, no longer coincidence. This was a 100% forensic match. The HVAC fabric scrap came from Stephen Roldan's uniform. Why was the torn fabric thrown in the trash of the 1991 investigation? Old files show the original team logged the fabric, but Midas, no one knew whose it was. It didn't resemble Laura's clothes. No witness mentioned a man in a maintenance uniform. No microanalysis technology existed. The fabric was labeled unidentified foreign material and placed in secondary evidence storage, not primary. In retrospect, Esquivel wrote, "The fabric was proof the perpetrator physically touched the scene, but in 1991, no one could read its language. The reality was stark. The perpetrator left behind a literal piece of the uniform he wore that night, but the technology of the time couldn't see it. Roldan was present, lied, left fabric, left blood. The four biggest forensic pieces now fit perfectly. 1. Roldan lied. I was home. Invoice proves he was at HEB at 9 p.m. 2. HVAC fabric dropped near the scene 100% matched to his company uniform. 3. Blood stain on Laura's shirt pocket. Genealogical DNA identifies the Roldan lineage. Triangulation points solely to Stephen Roldan. 4. 7-minute camera gap. Roldan is the only person with motive and opportunity to turn the camera. Every trace pointed to the same man. Not guesswork, not coincidence. A airtight chain of forensic logic. Esquivel wrote in his evaluation, alibi destroyed, physical evidence matches, DNA matches, timeline matches. No room left for Roldan to escape suspicion. Why did he lie? After reviewing all files, the team listed 3 possibilities. 1. He never thought anyone would check in 1991. Contractors weren't considered suspects. Saying, "I was home" was enough. 2. He wanted to distance himself from the scene immediately. If he knew Laura was missing, he instantly created separation. "I wasn't involved." 3. He didn't know the invoice was still kept, and that very oversight came back to bite him. A supermarket's routine maintenance records accidentally became evidence against him nearly 30 years later. One detective remarked, "Many killers are clever, but they can't outsmart the fact that paperwork doesn't lie." The perpetrator left behind the very tools of his daily trade. The HVAC fabric was what he wore to work. He wore standard HVAC gloves when Raphael saw him. He touched the camera with those gloves. He stood confidently in the dark cooling unit area, territory only an HVAC tech would know. In the combined forensic report, Elena wrote a line later quoted in the press, "Roldan didn't just leave evidence, he left his entire occupational environment at the scene." Meaning the killer didn't drop a weapon, a ring, or a wallet. He left the signature of his profession, something only he carried, and that profession became his calling card. He never thought anyone still had that scrap of fabric. In a December 2019 internal meeting, Esquivel placed the HVAC scrap on the conference table and said, "This sat in secondary evidence storage for 28 years. If someone had cleaned the warehouse a little too thoroughly, the case would have lost the killer's evidence forever." No one argued. If not for Elena Marquez, who re-examined every item with modern forensic eyes, that fabric would still be unidentified foreign material. But now it was part of an iron triad. Invoice timeline, occupational evidence. A young technician whispered during the meeting. He basically confessed to himself back in 1991. Conclusion of Part 15. Roldan's alibi completely collapsed. Esquivel closed the file and wrote the final line of the report. There is no longer any question whether Roldan was there that night. The only question left, what did he do to Laura? And with the alibi shattered and physical evidence confirmed, the investigation moved into its next phase, tracking Stephen Roldan in the present world and obtaining a direct modern DNA sample from him. Once Stephen Manuel Roldan's alibi was utterly destroyed, and the HVAC fabric proved his profession was tied to the scene, Edinburg PD entered the most critical stage of any cold case with a living suspect, obtaining a direct modern DNA sample from him, to compare 1-1 with the 1991 bloodstain. No direct sample, no arrest warrant, no interrogation, no 1-1 One match. Everything remains circumstantial. Forensic genealogy can narrow it down to one name, but to prosecute, a conclusive DNA match is required. Locating Stephen Roldan's current residence. In January 2020, Detective Carlos Esquivel and the cold case team pinpointed Roldan's address in Pharr, Texas, just a 12-minute drive from Edinburg. He was living an extremely ordinary life, 58 years old, divorced, freelance HVAC technician, no criminal record, no registered firearms, drove a faded 1998 silver Dodge Ram, lived in an old duplex in a quiet neighborhood. A man so unremarkable that no one would ever guess he had hidden a secret for 3 decades. Beginning surveillance, without letting him know he was under investigation. Under legal rules, police cannot demand DNA directly without probable cause or a warrant, but under federal law, they can collect DNA from items a suspect voluntarily discards, such as rocking cups, soda cans, tissues, cigarette butts, ashes, discarded toothbrushes, single-use utensils, as long as the item is placed in public trash or curbside garbage. This is called abandoned DNA, fully admissible in court. On February 5, 2020, a covert surveillance team began tailing Roldan. Roldan's habits created the opening over 3 weeks of surveillance. They logged, Roldan drank coffee every morning at the Stripes convenience store, occasionally bought a burrito, and ate it in his truck, almost always wore work gloves, and most importantly, he always serviced air conditioners in his garage, refrigeration oil on his hands constantly. One detective noted, if he touches anything and throws it away, the DNA will be mixed with compressor oil, an occupational marker that matches 19. That was exactly what they needed. Golden opportunity, the styrofoam cup tossed next to the trash can. On February 22, 2020, around 7:15 a.m., Roldan stopped at Stripes as usual. He bought coffee and stood alone at the metal table outside the door. When he finished, he lightly crushed the styrofoam cup and tossed it into the public trash can beside the gas pumps. That was the moment the surveillance team had waited 3 weeks for. The instant Roldan pulled out of the parking lot, an investigator walked up, gloved, used tweezers to retrieve the cup. It still had a few drops of coffee left and clear lip prints. This was modern DNA. Another officer grabbed the lid as well, where Roldan's fingers had pressed to snap it on. Both items were sealed, time-stamped, coded, and delivered to the Hidalgo lab within 40 minutes. Lab processing of the abandoned DNA. Refrigeration oil appears. Elena Marquez received the samples at 9:26 a.m. She examined the cup under the microscope and immediately noticed something striking, a faint grayish oily smear on the rim. Compressor lubricant. If confirmed, it was an eerie match to 1991, when the fabric scrap near the canal also carried the same type of oil. Elena swabbed it, ran a quick chemical screen, and the result made everyone freeze. Compound match, refrigeration lubricant type 1990-2000, identical to lubricant found on HVAC uniforms and R22 compressors, not just DNA that fit the occupation. His occupation literally left its fingerprint on the item he threw away. DNA extraction, comparison with the 2013 S&P profile. The styrofoam cup yielded 2 biological sources, Midas skin cells from fingers, Beacle cells from lip prints on the rim. Elena extracted both samples independently to avoid cross-contamination. Sample 1, lip print high quality. Sample 2, lid rim, moderate but sufficient for STR. Within 72 hours, Elena had the STR results from the analyzer. She opened the archived 2013 S&P profile, the genome built from the blood on Laura's shirt pocket, and hit compare. It took the computer 6 seconds to answer. One line appeared on the black screen. Match, 100.00% probability. Source, same individual. Elena stood motionless for a moment. 30 years of waiting, 30 years of darkness, 30 years of a faceless case, answered in 6 words, same individual. 100.00% match. Not a relative, not the same lineage, not a distant match. him. Second confirmation. Double verification. The standard required for an arrest warrant, under modern cold case protocol, a single 100% match is still not enough. It must be 1. Rerun by an independent second analyst. 2. Confirmed with both STR and SNP. 3. Checked against CODIS, even if the suspect has no record to rule out duplicates or data error. Over the next 48 hours, Analyst 2 repeated the entire process from scratch. Result 100% match. SNP from the Styrofoam cup matched the 2013 SNP with 0 allele discrepancies. STR from the cup matched perfectly. The STR obtained from the 1991 blood-stained CODIS returned. Sample not in CODIS, but internally matched to case 91 EDB-LM. The entire forensic chain was now complete. Modern DNA = 1991. DNA, covered in refrigeration oil, = Roldan's occupation, alibi destroyed, uniform fabric 100% match, timeline matches to the minute. Elena, who rarely showed emotion, wrote only one short line at the end of the report: "This is the man, there is no alternative explanation." Police prepare the arrest warrant. On March 2, 2020, Esquivel submitted the full forensic package to the Hidalgo County District Attorney's Office. The meeting lasted 3 hours. No one in the room questioned the certainty of the evidence. They only discussed how to approach without risk. One prosecutor said, "If we let him slip away again, there won't be a second chance." The plan agreed upon: seek arrest warrant for felony kidnapping with violence. Seek search warrant for residence for additional evidence. Request U.S. Marshal's assistance. No media notification, no neighborhood warning. The arrest operation was codenamed Operation Back Dock, a reminder of where Laura was taken. Preparing for confrontation. 30 years leading to this single moment. The night of March 4, 2020, just hours before execution, a young cold case officer said he thought 1991 was too long ago for anyone to find him. But DNA doesn't forget. Esquivel replied, "Tomorrow, Edinburgh gets the answer it has waited almost 3 decades for." With the 100% DNA match confirmed and the arrest warrant in process, the cold case team decided to take one final step that modern major cases require, before final submission to prosecutors: forward reconstruction, a complete scene recreation based not on statements or guesses, but on every piece of physical forensic lighting, camera angle, and human behavior data in the actual space. Esquivel wanted an irrefutable conclusion. Only one person, Stephen Roldan, could have reached Laura in those 7 minutes. Forward reconstruction was the scientific way to prove it. Preparation, merging all 1991 data into 2020. First, the team recreated the rear area of the HEB using my 1991 store blueprints, original crime scene photos, the turned camera position, 1991 lighting system electrical records, light mapping data, locations of cooling units, and dumpsters, rear door opening arc, distance to the parking lot, width of the delivery vehicle lane. A full 3D model was built with forensic mapping software. Every foot of ground was remeasured to exact 1991 dimensions. Elena explained, "We are not reconstructing to find out where Laura went. We are reconstructing to prove how the perpetrator could reach her, and in how many seconds." Camera position. The perpetrator stood exactly in the blind spot. The 1991 camera was analog, fixed tilt, low resolution. From maintenance records, it was mounted at 9 feet on a metal bracket. When the team input the abnormal 27-degree turn into the 3D software, it produced an exact simulation. The camera now covered only 1/3 of the lot. The entire area near the fence and cooling units became a blind zone. In the 3D model, placing a 5'11" figure, Roldan's height at the spot where Raphael saw the gloved man in the dark, the software confirmed the 1991 camera could not capture any movement at that location. The man standing there was completely invisible to the lens. The blind zone matched Raphael's statement, 100%. It also matched 100% with the spot where Laura disappeared from the footage. Lighting, or rather, the absence of it. The 1991 rear lighting, consisted only of one yellow sodium wall light, one weak bulb over the receiving area, no supplemental lighting at the cooling units. The back lot lay in patchy illumination. Police fed the 1991 lighting data into the model. Average brightness, 4.7 lux. Extremely dark zone. Contrast with parked vehicles, shadows tripled in depth. Distance from Laura stepping out the back door to complete darkness, 21 feet, just 6-7 steps. A forensic analyst said, once Laura crossed the edge of the wall light, the perpetrator could reach her unseen, exactly as the footage showed. Laura vanished from the lit area in only 2 frames. Determining approach vector, the perpetrator was already waiting using the glint of gloves. Raphael described the location where the HVAC fabric was found near the canal, the most viable escape routes from the lot, the camera blind zone, the 1991 gravel fold footprints report. The software calculated the most logical perpetrator, approach 1. He stood at the fence edge, next to the cooling units, in the deepest shadow. 2. From that spot to the HEB back door, 31 feet 3. From that spot to where Laura entered darkness, 14 feet 4. From that spot to the north lot exit, 63 feet. When the simulation ran, an adult male with a 2.6-foot stride, moving fast but not running, reaches Laura in 4.2 seconds. 4.2 seconds, enough to close the gap silently, enough to subdue without drawing attention. Elena said, she had no chance to react. The kidnapping moment, second-by-second breakdown. The forward reconstruction simulated every second of the timeline. 9 hours 0 minutes and 0 seconds. PM Laura exits the back door, holding her purse. Camera captures her. 9 hours 0 minutes and 5 seconds. PM Laura takes 6 more steps, entering the light-to-dark boundary. 9 hours 0 minutes and 8 seconds. PM Laura is fully inside the blind zone. Camera loses her. 9 hours 0 minutes and 9 seconds. PMA perpetrator, model moves from the cooling unit position. 9 hours 0 minutes and 13 seconds. PMA closes the distance in 4 seconds. Distance between Laura and perpetrator on the model, 0.4 meters. 9 hours 0 minutes and 15 seconds. PM based on height, broad shoulders, witness description, and estimated weight, he can overpower from behind in one motion. Left arm locks shoulder, right hand over mouth, pull backward away from light. Laura caught completely off guard, no time to scream, time to fully subdue an unsuspecting victim, 2-3 seconds. 9 hours 0 minutes and 18 seconds. PM perpetrator drags Laura toward the cooling units, outside camera view. From this point the simulation confirms, camera cannot see them, no light reaches them, minor sounds masked by compressor noise. The entire kidnapping, from Laura entering darkness to being pulled out of sight, lasted only 18 seconds. Escape routes, the viable paths. The forward reconstruction identified 3 possible escape routes. Route A, around the cooling unit's delivery lane. Time, 14 seconds. No camera, no light. Best match for HVAC fabric found near North Canal. Route B, along the fence. Employee parking. Time, 22 seconds. Risk of exposure if late vehicle arrived. Route C, straight across the north vacant lot. Time, 45 seconds. Matches 1991. Compressed soil report. Matches fabric tear likely caused by fence. Based on physical evidence, the software concluded Route C was the path used by the perpetrator. Forensic timestamps that locked the simulation. The forward reconstruction wasn't just logical, it had to match every piece of forensic data. HVAC fabric locase, matches escape route, compressed soil matches modeled path. 9:07 p.m. camera gap matches 7-minute window. Large shoe print match approach vector, metallic clank. Witnesses heard matches loose metal pipes at cooling units. Rolled in sign out at 9:59 p.m. Enough time to handle victim plus leave normally. The model showed the perpetrator had to be in the lot before 9 p.m. exactly matching Raphael's report of gloved man, standing in the dark. Hash. Conclusion of the forward reconstruction. The 62-page report, attached to the arrest warrant request, concluded, based on time lighting, movement, camera approach angles and on-scene physical evidence simulation, only one individual was present at the precise location, at the precise time, with sufficient knowledge of the cooling unit area, and who left DNA at the scene: Stephen Manuel Roldan. Another line was boxed in red. The kidnapping occurred quickly, silently, and with precision. Timing that proves the perpetrator had previously observed the back door. The forward reconstruction was the final piece of evidence, the last puzzle piece, and the decisive nail that made the Hidalgo County District Attorney's Office sign the arrest warrant. In the combined report, Esquivel wrote, "There is no longer any doubt about the timeline, no doubt about access, no doubt about the man standing in the dark. Forward reconstruction proves the perpetrator waited, and he executed the act in under 20 seconds. On March 6, 2020, at 7:42 a.m., the Hidalgo County District Attorney's Office officially signed the arrest warrant for Stephen Manuel Roldan on charges of kidnapping with aggravating factors, felony 1, and tampering with evidence. For the first time in 29 years, his name appeared under primary suspect in an official legal document. The warrant was immediately transmitted to Edinburg PD Texas DPS and the U.S. Marshals Service in case Roldan tried to flee across the border. But Detective Carlos Esquivel knew better. This man wasn't the type to run. In nearly 3 decades, he had never left South Texas more than 60 miles. He chose invisibility. He chose an ordinary life. He chose to be the person no one noticed. That was how he had escaped for 30 years, until DNA dragged him out of the shadows. Locating Roldan, West Laco, Texas. The night before the arrest, surveillance reported that Roldan had left his far home and driven to West Laco, 20 minutes away, to service the air conditioning system at a self-serve car wash. That was his routine. Scattered jobs all over South Texas, always small low-profile locations. 7:10 a.m. Surveillance update. Target arrived. White 1998 Dodge Ram parked behind the building. He's working alone. Esquivel looked at the signed warrant, nodded. Operation Back Dock was officially green-lit. 7:32 a.m. Approach. 3 unmarked Edinburg police units and 1 U.S. Marshals vehicle rolled into West Laco from opposite directions. No sirens, no lights, no announcements. The car wash where Roldan was working sat between 2 empty lots, an ideal location for a safe, low-profile arrest. The team split into 3 groups. Rup 1, Esquivel plus Marshall, front approach Marsh. Rup 2, cover the rear door and grass escape. Rup 3, block Roldan's Dodge Ram. 7:34 a.m. Marshall signaled, move. 7:35 a.m. Stephen Manuel Roldan, step away from the unit. Roldan was bent over a compressor unit, wearing gloves, uniform covered in oil. Esquivel stepped forward, voice loud and clear, Stephen Manuel Roldan, Police Department, turn around and step away from the unit. Roldan straightened up. For a few seconds his face registered shock, then an eerie calm. He didn't run. He didn't fight. He didn't ask what's this about. He simply said, I'm right here. Esquivel motioned to the marshal. Handcuffs clicked shut. The man who wore gloves the night of 1991 was now handcuffed while still wearing gloves. High-D check. Everything matched. They searched his pockets. Pardas. Stephen Manuel Roldan, born 1961. Occupation, HVAC technician. Address, FAR. License plate matched surveillance data. No doubt left. But what sent chills down the team's spines wasn't the ID. It was a 1991 missing person flyer of Laura Martinez, folded and worn, found in his wallet. Why? No one could answer, but one detective whispered. He kept her picture for almost 30 years. Old photo discovered. Roldan joined the 1991 search party. Moments after Roldan was placed in the patrol car, Esquivel received a text from the Edinburgh City Archives unit. Found 1991 search party photo. The scanned image arrived, and it delivered the biggest shock of the entire investigation. In the black and white photo, taken about 3 days after Laura vanished, roughly 30 volunteers were searching the north vacant lots. Among them, slightly blurred but unmistakable, stood a tall man with dark hair wearing work gloves. It was Stephen Roldan. He had searched for Laura. He had stood beside her family. He had blended in with the crowd as a concerned neighbor. The picture was taken in 1991, but only in 2020 did they realize the killer had been part of the search party. Elena looked at the photo and said, "This is why he stayed hidden so long. He didn't run. He stood right in the middle of the crowd." Roldan en route to the station. Total silence. In the car, Roldan said nothing. Didn't ask why he was arrested. Didn't ask who Laura was. No reaction at all. The officer beside him later described it, like he'd been preparing for this day a long time. Still, his body showed clear stress, rigid hands, fixed stare, unblinking, heavy breathing, not emotionless. Just a man who understood it was over. 1991 photo comparison. 12-point facial identification match. Back at Edinburgh PD, forensic analyst ran facial recognition software comparing 1991 search party photo, 1998 DMV photo, current driver's license, arrest photos from that morning. Result: 12 out of 12 identification points matched. Brow arch, inter-eye distance, nasal bridge, hairline, jaw angle, eye-nose-chin ratios. No question left. The man in the search party was Roldan. Esquivel wrote, he joined the search for the victim he himself abducted. It had happened in a few famous cases elsewhere, but never in Edinburgh history. Laura's family's reaction. One small but devastating detail: when told the suspect was in custody, Laura's mother asked only one question: did he ever act like he was helping us? Esquivel answered, yes, he was in the search party. Laura's mother collapsed into a chair. No screaming, no tears, just silence, not from shock, but because that truth was the cruelest part of the entire case. The killer had searched for Laura alongside everyone else. He had blended into the crowd. He had looked her family in the eye. And no one knew. Preparing for the next phase. On March 7, 2020, less than 24 hours after arrest, Roldan was moved to the Edinburgh PD interrogation room. He remained silent, but police knew they had the DNA, the HVAC fabric, the invoice, the forward reconstruction, the search party photo, and a search warrant for his home. The Edinburgh PD interrogation room, on the morning of March 7, 2020, was so quiet you could hear a pen tapping on the metal table. On the wall, the clock ticked steadily, each sound thickening the air. Stephen Manuel Roldan sat cuffed in front, not strapped to the chair, head bowed. He was still wearing the HVAC uniform from the arrest, but the gloves had been seized. Detective Carlos Esquivel and U.S. Marshal Reyes entered. On the table sat a thick case file, not for intimidation, but to remind Roldan that 29 years of hiding were over. First round of interrogation. Statement 1. I don't know who she is. Esquivel opened with a simple question. Do you know Laura Martinez? Roldan stared at the floor. He slowly shook his head. No, don't remember. Never met her. Esquivel showed no reaction. He simply slid a photograph across the table in front of him. It was a photo of Laura, 1991 version, long hair, HEB uniform. You sure about that? Roldan still shook his head. No emotion, no shock, no vehement denial. Just a shake of the head, like someone denying an old bill. Esquivel moved to the next question. Did you ever work at the Edinburgh HEB? He answered immediately. No, I never serviced anything there. Esquivel knew that statement would be torn apart in minutes. Second round of interrogation. Statement 2. I did work there, but I didn't know anyone went missing. Esquivel placed the invoice on the table. Invoice hash 4421. Roldan Cooling and Repair Service date August 18, 1991. Time 6:30 p.m., 9:59 p.m. Signed in Roldan's own handwriting. Roldan stared at the paper. His hands began to tremble slightly. Well, maybe I did one job there or something. But I didn't know anyone went missing. I never saw anybody. Reyes leaned in. Never saw anybody. Didn't notice anyone. You were there the exact night Laura clocked out. Roldan swallowed hard, eyes drifting to the corner wall. I just fixed the unit and left. I don't know anything. This was statement 2, and it already contradicted statement 1. Hash. Third round of interrogation. Statement 3. My DNA on her shirt was from a cut while I was working. Esquivel opened the thick folder in front of him. Inside was the printed 100% DNA match analysis. We found your DNA on Laura Martinez's shirt pocket in 1991, and we found your DNA again on a coffee cup last week. Roldan leaned back, breathing faster. No, maybe I cut myself or scratched something while working near the back door. Blood splashed on her when she walked by, or something. Reyes cut in. You cut yourself and don't remember. She walked by, but you just said you never saw her. And why was the blood deep inside the pocket fold, something that only happens with extremely close contact? Roldan had no answer. Elena, watching from the observation room, spoke into the earpiece, hit him hard with the forensic details. There's no way to explain it. Esquivel continued. You said you cut yourself, but there's no hospital record, no bandage, no work injury report, and the experts say the blood was deposited under pressure contact, not splashed. Roldan clenched his hands, eyes darting wildly. Classic sign another story was coming. Hash. Fourth round of interrogation. Statement 4. There was someone else there, that day. I just walked past. Esquivel placed the 1991 search party photo on the table. In it Roldan standing with Laura's family, searching for the victim. You still say you never knew her, then why 3 days after she vanished, were you out searching for her with everyone else? Roldan stared at the picture for a very long time. Finally, he spoke. I was just passing by. I saw people gathered looking for her, so I helped. I wasn't the only one behind the store that day. There was another guy. Esquivel leaned forward. Name? Roldan don't know. Don't remember. Reyes, can you describe him? Roldan not really. It was dark. I didn't see his face. Reyes slid the forward reconstruction report across the table. If there was someone else, why didn't the camera catch him? The blind zone only fits one person, and witness Raphael described a tall, broad-shouldered man, exactly your build. Cornered on every side, Roldan closed his eyes and took a deep breath. I don't remember. This was the end of statement 4, and the last time he changed his story. From this point on, he said nothing more of substance. Hash. Why forensics destroyed every explanation. The answer was in Elena's and the team's forensic report. 1. The blood could not have splashed. Fibrin structure analysis showed blood was smeared compressed, located deep in the pocket fold, no spatter, no droplets, no streak, could only have been deposited by extremely close contact or pressure against the pocket. 2. No second person in the perpetrator's described location. Forward reconstruction confirmed. Camera blind zone only large enough for one person. A second person would have cast a visible shadow. Raphael saw only one dark figure. 3. The HVAC fabric could not have torn on its own. Houston lab analysis. Fibers torn by strong lateral pull, not natural abrasion. 100% match to Roldan's 1989-1993 uniforms. 4. Compressor oil on the modern coffee cup matched the 1991 sample, not a common oil. Exact vintage R22 compressor lubricant, the type Roldan used. 5. Timeline destroys any alibi. Invoice 9:59 p.m. Roldan still on site. Laura vanished 9 o'clock, 9:07 p.m. Approach distance only 4, 5 seconds. No one else was present. 6. DNA is absolute neither. 2013 SNP = bloodstain DNA. 2020 STR = coffee cup DNA. Both samples 100% identical. No error, no alternative explanation possible. Hash. Interrogation conclusion. The suspect boxed in on all 4 sides. After 6 hours, Esquivel stopped. He knew, no confession was needed. Forensics had already spoken. He gathered the documents, looked Roldan in the eye. "We don't need you to confess. The DNA already did." Roldan said nothing, didn't ask for a lawyer, no reaction. He simply lowered his head, for the first time since the arrest. Hash. Final phase, preparing for trial. When the interrogation ended, transcripts were signed, video was archived. Forensics sealed all analysis. The full file was submitted to the Hidalgo County DA. Within the next 48 hours, prosecutors would draft the formal indictment. Roldan was moved to a holding cell to await arraignment. 30 years after that dark 1991 night, the man who once stood in the shadows, who turned the camera, who dragged Laura into the blind spot, who joined the search party for the victim he abducted, was now locked inside 4 concrete walls. The trial of Stephen Manuel Roldan took place in early December 2020 at the Hidalgo County Courthouse. Even though 3 decades had passed since the night Laura Martinez vanished, no one in Edinburgh ever thought they would live to see the day the perpetrator walked into court, wearing an orange jumpsuit, wrists shackled, face aged and weathered by the years. But this trial was unlike any missing person case in South Texas history. No body, no eyewitness, no confession, only science, forensics, camera footage, HVAC fabric, DNA, and a 7-minute void that had chilled an entire town for nearly 30 years. And that very science, not emotion, became the strongest indictment prosecutors had ever presented in a no-body case. Prosecution. Opening cameras don't turn themselves. Hidalgo County District Attorney Karen Montez began with a calm, unraised voice. No drama, just simple truth. Cameras don't turn themselves. Someone turned it, and only one person was in that area. She projected the 1991 camera footage onto the screen. 3 key frames. 1. Frame 1. Laura stepping out the back door. 2. Frame 2. Camera angled 27 degrees off. 3. Frame 3. No Laura, no one. She continued. Turning a camera is not a spur-of-the-moment act. It's not a prank. It's not an accident. It requires access to the cooling units, knowledge of camera structure, understanding of the blind zone, and that night, the only person with access and presence there was Stephen Roldan. The jury, 6 women, 6 men, stared at the simulation images. Evidence 1. Perfect timeline match. Prosecutors presented the timeline, rebuilt with forensic reconstruction software. 6:30 p.m. Roldan signs in. 9 p.m. Laura clocks out. 9 o'clock. 9:07 p.m. Camera records no movement. 9:59 p.m. Roldan signs out. No other employee was near the cooling units at that time. No other contractor was logged. No delivery vehicles entered or left within 30 minutes of the disappearance. Prosecutor. The 7-minute gap is when Laura vanished. We know who stood inside that gap. Evidence 2. HVAC fabric scrap. The killer brought his own job to the scene. The Houston fabric analysis expert was called to testify. Prosecutor. The fabric found in 1991 matches which uniform? Expert. HVAC uniform, model 873TX, sold exclusively to Roldan Cooling and Repair from 1989 to 1993. Prosecutor. Any other company in Texas used this fabric? Expert. No, only Roldan Cooling. Evidence displayed on screen. 100% fabric match. One juror whispered, "That can't be coincidence." Evidence 3. 1991 DNA = modern DNA. This was the centerpiece of the trial. Forensics. Elena Marquez took the stand. The courtroom fell silent. She walked through the process, Bloodstain taken from Laura's shirt pocket in 1991. DNA, so tiny, no one thought it usable. Net SOMP sequencing in 2013. Genealogical comparison in 2019. Roldan family. DNA collected from coffee cup in 2020. Teen. SNP match 100%. Prosecutor. Is there any chance anyone other than Stephen Roldan could have this exact DNA? Elena, no. The probability of another person matching both SNP and STR is less than 1 in 400 trillion. Only one person, Stephen Manuel Roldan. No one in the courtroom moved. Evidence 4. Camera tampering, the killing blow. This was the part prosecutors hammered hardest, because it proved premeditation, the key element for conviction without a body. They played the camera reconstruction video, camera turned by, hand boss turned position matches, where Roldan stood per Rafael's statement, impossible to turn remotely, in required height, near camera or standing on something. Person turning, it had to know the blind zone. Camera turned before Laura exited the door. Prosecutor concluded, a camera turned exactly 27 degrees right before the victim's shift ended, is undeniable evidence of preparation. Roldan kept his head down, the jury stared, no one looked away from the screen. Evidence 5. Forward reconstruction, the software recreation of the kidnapping moment was shown. Laura steps into darkness. Perpetrator closes distance in 4.2 seconds. Camera cannot see. Need per oneness. No light reaches. Cooling unit area blocks all movement. The simulation made it clear. The perpetrator had to know the layout intimately. The perpetrator had to already be waiting, not passing by. The perpetrator had to prepare before Laura clocked out. Jurors exchanged glances. Many took notes. Prosecutor concluded, we don't need a body to see intent. Montez stepped forward, voice low but firm. We don't have a body, but we have the killer's DNA, the killer's fabric, the killer's timeline, the killer's position, and the camera turned by the killer's hand. A body doesn't make a crime. Intent does. She continued. If a man turns a camera, stands in the dark, is ready to reach her in 4 seconds, leaves his blood on the victim's shirt, and walks away like nothing happened, that is not an accident. That is premeditated kidnapping. Jury deliberation. The jury took only 2 hours to reach a verdict, an unusually short time for a no-body case. One juror later told reporters, I didn't need a body, I just needed the turned camera, and the DNA. Verdict. The judge read the decision. We, the jury, find the defendant, Stephen Manuel Roldan, guilty on all counts. Roldan looked at no one, no reaction, not a word. Closure, but not the end of the story. Prosecutors requested the maximum sentence. The jury agreed. Roldan was sentenced to life without parole. The Laura Martinez case, 29 years with no body, no eyewitness, became one of the rare Texas cases solved through forensic genealogy, plus forward reconstruction, plus camera analysis. But the story did not end there. A life sentence without parole for Stephen Manuel Roldan marked the legal end of the Laura Martinez disappearance, but for Edinburg PD and the Hidalgo County DA's office, it was not the final chapter. As the courtroom emptied, and the community finally breathed relief that justice had arrived after nearly 3 decades, Elena Marquez received an internal email from the Austin Forensic Lab. When she opened the attachment, she froze, not because of anything related to Roldan, but because a single fiber, stored in evidence for 29 years, had just become a new variable. Forgotten evidence. A fiber smaller than a fingernail. The 1991 evidence was well preserved. Laura's shirt, the HVAC fabric, a few unidentified hairs, shoe sole dirt, metal dust from the cooling units. But in box 17, B92 was an old pre-1995 nylon bag containing an item no one ever cared about, because it was too small. A 3mm fiber, gray-brown, labeled simply, unknown fiber, collected near fence line. In 1991, forensics could do nothing with it. In 2005, same. In 2013, still too small for SNP, but in 2020, with nano-extraction technology, the Austin lab tried again. And that result opened a new chapter. Forensic result. The fiber belonged to neither Laura nor Roldan. The report sent to Edinburg PD on December 15, 2020, stated clearly, fiber type, polyester 45%, cotton 55%, color, gray-brown, does not match HVAC uniform color, pattern, twill, 2x1, does not match Roldan uniform type, origin, likely from work pants or utility wear, DNA extraction, negligible, but trace human, protein present touch DNA profile, one allele, that does not match Roldan, and does not match Laura ##. Final conclusion, fiber likely belongs to a third individual, possible secondary participant. This was the biggest shock since the day DNA identified Roldan. Elena called Esquivel immediately, we have a second person. This isn't coincidence. The fiber was caught in the fence, at the exact same time the HVAC fabric tore off. It doesn't belong to the victim, and it doesn't belong to the perpetrator. Esquivel only replied, so who else was standing behind that parking lot that night? Forward reconstruction revisited. Was there room for two people? The reconstruction team part 17 was called back in. They ran the simulation again, this time placing two models in the blind zone. Model 1, Roldan, approach position toward Laura. Model 2, unknown male, pressed against the fence, where the fiber was found. Results. The blind zone is still large enough for two people, if one stands flush against the fence. The 27-degree camera turn actually widens the hidden area. If the second person was acting as lookout, or watching the back door, the camera would never capture him. One investigator said, if there was an accomplice, he never appeared in any statement, not even in Roldan's lies. Motive for turning the camera, maybe not a one-man job. DA Montez was briefed immediately. She reviewed the 1991 camera data, and commented, the camera was turned once, but at a very precise angle. Either one person turned it, or one held the ladder while the other turned it. Esquivel nodded. The scenario becomes more plausible, with two people. One turns the camera, one approaches Laura, both withdrawal along the fence line. HVAC fabric, tears off primary perpetrator, gray-brown fiber tears off accomplice. Still, it remains only a plausible scenario. No name, no clear DNA yet. Possible accomplice, analyzing Roldan's behavior in the search party. From March 2020 onward, Edinburg PD had re-examined every 1991 search party photo. Only about 3 pictures clearly showed participants' faces. In one photo, 4 people away from Roldan, stands a man in a baseball cap, face obscured by shadow. Not enough for a conclusion, not enough for identification, but Elena said, that photo needs enhanced resolution analysis. The fiber might belong to the man in that picture. The chance is tiny, but forensics often starts with the tiniest pieces. Lab opens new file. Fiber case, 17B92X. The gray-brown fiber received its own case file. Case 17B92X. Fiber unknown participant. The file will reattempt touch DNA extraction as new technology arrives. Me compared to databases as matches appear. Be cross-checked against 1991 HEB employees. Be cross-checked against secondary HVAC contractors. Be cross-checked against seasonal workers in the area. The immediate hit rate is extremely low, but the possibility of an accomplice is strong enough that it cannot be ignored. Esquivel stated, the Laura case has been tried, but the investigation is not over. If there was a second person, we will find him. The Edinburg community, from closure to new unease. After the trial, the press called it, cold case solved, but not closed. Edinburg residents had mixed reactions. Some felt relief that Roldan was locked away. Some now worried a second person might still live among them. Some believed it was just contamination, but many deeply believed Laura could not have vanished that fast with only one man. Laura's mother said in an interview, "I know there's someone else out there. I've always felt someone was watching my daughter along with Roldan that night." Finally, justice arrived, but the investigation continues. On December 20th, 2020, Edinburg PD's case log received one new line: primary case closed, defendant convicted. Secondary fiber evident, new active case. 30 years of waiting brought Roldan into the light, but a 3ME fiber just opened another door, a door to a new case, an unnamed suspect, a shadow who may have stood in the blind zone that night, right beside the cooling units, just before Laura disappeared from the camera forever. And the story ends with Esquivel's own words: "We found the man who stood in the dark. Now we need to know, was anyone standing behind him?" Looking back at the 1991 Edinburg case we just walked through, it's easy to think it's just a distant tragedy, but this story hits straight at American life today. Laura was simply a young woman working the night shift at HEB, walking out the back door on Klausner Avenue, the same way millions of Americans still clock out from retail jobs every evening. Her disappearance began with details that seemed minor: a parking lot corner darker than usual, a rear store camera turned slightly, and no one thought it was a big deal, a gloved man standing too long in the shadows by the cooling units. The first lesson for us today is, in an increasingly busy society, the things we shrug off as weird but whatever can be the thin line between safety and tragedy. If you're a store manager, a night shift worker, or just a neighbor, take signs like moved cameras, broken lights, or strangers lingering in parking lots seriously. Don't hesitate to report them. Don't fear overreacting. The second lesson comes from how the case was actually solved: a tiny HVAC fabric scrap, a pinhead-sized bloodstain on a shirt pocket, a discarded styrofoam coffee cup, S&P profiles, GED Match Pro. All of it shows that justice today relies not just on testimony, but on science and decades of carefully preserved evidence. That reminds us of the value of law enforcement agencies, of investing in forensics, and of the responsibility to balance privacy rights with the use of genetic data to protect the community. Finally, the fact that Roldan joined the search party for the very victim he abducted reminds us that evil doesn't always look evil. So instead of living in paranoia, the practical takeaway for Americans is this: build alert but calm communities, trust science, support cold case units, and teach our kids, especially those working-class night shift workers, young people, low-income employees, how to read danger signals around them, because the Edinburg tragedy started with nothing more than a dark stretch of parking lot and a camera turned 27 degrees. If you want to keep following these powerful journeys of justice, like the 1991 Edinburg case, please remember to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a single story. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video, where we continue shining light on cases everyone thought were lost forever in the dark.